So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you 3 workflows that I set up that allow me to analyze direct competitors in my directory niche. And I'm going to show you how I go from having a list of keywords to doing a search engine results page analysis where I find out who else is ranking for my target keywords, to then doing an in-depth breakdown of those competitors where I find out what it is that they do, how they make money, what their pros and strengths are, and a whole bunch more. That and more in this video. Let's get into it. Hey friends, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down some key workflows that I set up in order to analyze my competition for my directory on Autopilot. Now, this is definitely something that you can use even if you are not building a directory. This really applies to any type of niche where you are planning on attracting a majority of your clients through organic search. Now, in the previous video, we went over how I do keyword research, how I use tools like Keyword Planner or Ahrefs to basically find keywords that I can compete for. But this video today dives a lot more into the aspect of seeing who else we are competing with so that we can then use those insights to develop a strategy around our content and our business. Now, everyone's going to have their own way of doing competitor analysis, but the way that I've set it up follows a simple 4-step process. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my list of keywords to identify the top target keywords relevant to my business. So I'm essentially going to reduce a list of, say, 6,000 keywords down to maybe 100 or 150. Then as soon as I've found those target keywords, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a workflow that analyzes the search engine results page so I can then see which websites rank in the top 8 for every single search term. And then once I've identified what websites and companies appear most often and are most similar to what it is that I am offering with my directory, I then run an in-depth competitor analysis where I basically get to learn everything about their business, like where they're located, what it is that they do, how they make money, what people like about them, and what people don't like about them, because that then leads me to the final step in this process, which is to then take all of that research and turn it into a content strategy for my directory. This can mean figuring out what search filters it needs. It can be what kind of content blocks I need, but it can also inform things like how I'm actually going to structure my business around my directory. Now, before we get into it, this week I have started onboarding the first few founders into the local directory playbook, where I'll be walking you through the step-by-step process of setting up your own directory website. Now, as part of that, you'll get access to your own project management dashboard where I will give you access to a whole bunch of different resources that you'll be able to use to then go through the process of building your directory from scratch. Now, if you are interested in wanting to join the early founders program where you basically get to test how it all works, just join the waitlist. I'll send you an email with a questionnaire, fill that out, and then I'll be in touch with the next steps. With that being said, one of the modules inside of this is going to be exactly what I'm going to be showing you today. So let's start off with the first part of it, which is the workflow that I use to categorize keywords. Okay, so the first step in this entire process is to take the list of keywords that we got through Keyword Planner or whatever keyword planning tool you use, and to from there identify the top target keywords that we want to work towards. Now, typically I have a few set of criteria that I look into when I identify what keywords I want to target. Number one is how relevant is the specific search term or the search query to what my directory is doing. For example, with the running directory, the directory is set up to help people find running races. So if someone types in find a running coach, it's not directly what it is that we do, and therefore has slightly lower relevance to what I'm doing. Then search intent. The next thing that I want to figure out is what stage of the buying process is a particular person in when they type in a certain search query. For example, if someone is looking for something like how to run a 5K race, they're definitely not at the same stage as someone who's typing in a search term like 5K race near me soon. something like that. And so what I want to do is I want to figure out what is the actual intent from the person who is making the search. And then I also want to break down the actual search category. Now, this is probably more relevant to people building directory businesses, but you basically want to figure out what is it that is most important to them. Is it the location? Is it a specific category like distance? But again, depending on what it is that your directory does, it might have a whole different set of criteria that you should be looking into. Now, the way that I do this is I now have a workflow that takes my entire list of keywords. So this is this keyword list here, and then analyzes on my behalf. Now, the way that I do this is I start off by getting all of these keywords and putting them into my Airtable base. Now, the reason why I put it into my Airtable base is one, it has good integrations with some of the automation tools that I use, and two, it allows me to organize things visually quite easily. Now, by default, I always import the values that I get from Keyword Planner, like search volume, competition level, competition index, and then trends. But I now also need to create my own separate fields that I can then use to categorize each keyword in a way that works best for me. So the way that I categorize them is by using the relevance field, the intent field, and the search category field. And what I am basically doing in the background is I am running a workflow that looks at a keyword and then determines if the relevance to my business is low, medium, or high. Then it also identifies what the actual search intent is, and I usually have 4 different ones. The first one is navigational, and navigational essentially means they are actually looking for a specific listing. So in my case, they're looking for a specific running race. Informational is when they're just doing research into a certain topic. For example, what is the best strategy for running a half marathon? Transactional are keywords that are when people are more ready to buy. So for example, they are looking for a running race near me. And then a high intent research can be something that is not quite at the buying stage yet, but indicates that the buying stage is coming up pretty soon. So that can be anything like, how long do I need to train for a marathon? Then I also finally have the search category field, and this again is going to be very specific to what it is that I'm doing, but I basically break it down by the location. So if someone searches for something like race near me, by the distance, if someone searches for something like half marathon, or if someone is looking for a specific run type like cross country or trial running, those types of things. And so obviously with this list, I could manually go through everything step by step, but you can now pretty much automate all these workflows by setting up a make.com workflow. Now, the way that I do this in a nutshell is that I just go ahead, set up a ChatGPT prompt where I explain exactly what it is that my business does, what the actual purpose of the platform is, and then I define my search intent categories. I define the category types, and then the relevance and how to prioritize certain types of keywords. This is just a simple prompt, and I then also specify how I want the output to be delivered. Now, just so that I am not constantly creating multiple long prompts for individual keywords, what I do first is I actually just batch keywords into a JSON array so that my ChatGPT prompt actually delivers results for 10 keywords at once rather than doing them one at a time. And so this is what the output of my ChatGPT prompt will look like. I'm going to have 10 collections or bundles, which represents one keyword. And in here, I'll have my keyword, I'll have an Airtable ID, and then it will automatically for me generate the search intent level, the category level, and then also the priority. And so that will then just go through this entire list here and analyze every single one of my keywords for me. Now, in order for me to generate this JSON string with all of the keywords that I want to analyze, basically what I do is I retrieve all of the keywords from my Airtable base, and I then bundle them all together by using this aggregator step. And so basically what it does is it takes all of the individual records that it finds in Airtable, and it then just turns it into one big array. And then this step here converts the array to a JSON file, and then that JSON ultimately then gets fed into my prompt so that ChatGPT knows what keywords to analyze. Now, as soon as the output is generated, as you can see here, what I ask it to do then is to then iterate again through every single one of those keywords, which basically means to take that block of 10 keywords and to break them into individual keywords. And then from there, I just simply go ahead and I update every single Airtable record by the Airtable record ID with the search intent field, location, and priority. And that ultimately then leads to my Airtable base looking something like this, where I have basically analyzed all of my keywords. Now, in case you're wondering, this here only cost me about $3 for 1,000 keywords. So you can actually do this very, very cost effectively. But after having done all of this, it's now a lot easier for me to now identify target keywords. And so what I end up doing is setting filters where I basically say, hey, the keyword needs to have a very high relevance to my directory. I also want the categories only to be distance and location based searches. So I could also include run types or event specific searches, but in this case, I just wanted to say location and distance. And then the intent has to be either high intent or transactional. Now, depending on how many keywords you actually have to start off with, you might need to widen your search a bit or widen your criteria, but I really want to narrow down the list of 6,000 keywords that I have down to maybe 100 so that I know exactly what to focus on. So the next part in this process is, now that I have my 80 keywords that I'm going to be targeting for my directory, I now need to figure out what kind of websites are ranking for those keywords already. And so what I want to do is basically go through every single one of those keywords and run what's called a search engine results page analysis. And basically what it does is you type in the keyword and it basically lists all of the different websites that are ranking for that specific term. Now, what is it that I'm actually doing here? So the first thing that I'm looking for is, what type of website is it that is ranking high for that particular keyword? Is it a blog? Is it another directory? Is it the actual vendor's website? Because understanding what kind of websites are ranking high for certain key terms will ultimately help you understand what kind of content you'll need to create in your directory. The next thing that I want to figure out is, who is the actual company or owner of that website, and what does their business actually do? Because I ideally want to identify people or businesses that are actually in competition to what I am doing. So this is not always just other directory websites, but it can be, certain types of vendors, referral sites, all those types of things. And so having an understanding of what every website does will make it easier for me to then narrow down who the key competition is that I'm up against. And then finally, another thing that is incredibly important is, I want to find out how many keywords those competitors are actually ranking for in my entire list, because the more keywords they rank for, obviously the more spread they have and the more I need to look into who they are. Now, if I had to break down a real practical example of what we would have to do manually, we would just simply take a keyword that we want to target. So in this case, 5K races near me. And then we would just simply find out what websites are actually ranking in the top 8 spots for this keyword. So here we've got a website called Run Guides, another website called Run Guides, then we've got the Ottawa Race Weekend website. And so ultimately what I want to do is, I just want to figure out what kind of sites are being prioritized here by Google and what kind of content are they creating. Now, the slightly more automated version of this is to use a tool like Apify. So what you can do is essentially the exact same thing. I'm using the Google search results scraper tool in Apify, and all I really do here is I just type in the actual keyword that I'm targeting. So I'll do something like 5K races near me. Then you can also specify things like, where are you located, and what are the number of results that you're after, that type of stuff. Then all you need to do is just run it, and this will then essentially simulate what you would do if you typed in that particular search result or that search query into Google. Now, this process here usually only takes a few seconds, but what it will do is it will then return a list of organic results. So it will show you who are the websites that are ranking the highest, who are they, that type of stuff. And now that you kind of see how we do this in a tool like Apify, let's jump into the workflow where we fully automate this process. Now, when you're using Apify to run a scraping tool, what you actually have to do is break your workflow into two parts. The first workflow is what basically starts the scraper. So it is the equivalent of hitting the start button inside of our tool here. And so what it is that we do is we add our search term, then hit the start button. This is essentially what this first workflow does. It just takes the keyword that we want to target. And so this case, I fire it from inside of Airtable, retrieve the keyword that I am targeting. And then what I do is I programmatically type my keyword into here, but I do this in JSON format. And then I just basically paste this JSON code into my workflow query that will then start the scraper. So let's have a quick little look at what this looks like in practice. I basically just go ahead, paste this in here, and then I'm dynamically populating my query based on what I retrieved from Airtable. So if we're going to have a look one more time, you can see that it is populating my keyword based on the record that is found here. So what's going to happen in the background is it's going to start searching for different keywords. As soon as it's found it, it will then fire a webhook for a second make.com workflow that will then allow me to retrieve the results that it found. Now, this is what this workflow looks like, and I'm going to break it down in the most simplest terms that I can. But basically what happens is in this first step, Apify has received a result, and this is what this first step does. But this first step doesn't actually give you the actual search results. What it gives you is a field called a dataset ID, and you can now use that dataset ID to now retrieve the search results. And so that is what I'm doing in my second step here. I'm basically saying, hey, here's the dataset ID that I'm working with, and what I need you to do is to just show me what results I got. And what it will do is it will then provide organic search results with all of the key terms that we're working with. It looks a little bit like this. And this is essentially what you would find if you typed in that particular key term into Google. Now that we have that, we now need to go and store this information inside of Airtable. Now, the first step that I'm going to need to take here is actually find the right record to update in Airtable, because obviously every single one of these records here is unique, and every single one of these records has its own unique record ID that we're going to need in order to update it. But because you can't actually pass through this Airtable record ID through the Apify app, we're actually going to need a little in-between step. And this in-between step is what we do here. What I do is I take the result that I got from here, and this will include my search query. And what I'm doing with this search query is I'm basically saying, hey, can you find me the Airtable record that contains the search query from the previous step? And typically what it will do is it will then go ahead, find it, and that will then allow you to retrieve the Airtable record ID of the record that we're then later on going to use in order to store our search engine results. So what is it that we do next? So the next thing that we're going to do is, now that we've got our record and we've got our search engine results, now what we want to do is we want to store these results inside of our Airtable record. And so what we're going to do is we are going to, first of all, take this block of organic search results. So we've got 8 of them, and we're going to split them into individual records so that we can process each website that was found individually. And so what we do here is we then, once it's broken into individual bundles, is running it through a ChatGPT step that formats my information. And so what I ask it to do here is I ask it to convert all of the results into a JSON string that provides the base website URL and the name of the company. And so the end result that I get then for each record is the URL of the company that was ranking for that particular keyword, as well as their name. Now, it will go through every single one of these records and basically find out who they are, what it is that they do. And now I can then go ahead and then start adding them as competitors to my Airtable base. So if we go ahead and look at the next step, what I'm doing here is I am taking the competitor that was found, and I'm then saying, hey, can you go and check out our competitors table, which is this table here, and can you see whether or not there is a company with this particular website? And if it finds it, it will return the record, and if it doesn't, it will simply let me know, hey, this competitor doesn't exist yet. And then from here, what I do is I simply go ahead and I say, hey, if it exists, update it. If it doesn't exist, add a new one. And so then it just goes through that step for every single one of the listings that it found. And it then ultimately leads to me having a list of competitors who have ranked for one of my target keywords. Now you can see there's a range of them, but what that will allow me to do is to then later on see what companies are ranking for what keywords, or what websites are ranking for what keywords, and you can see it all in here. Now, what I will be able to do next is I'll be able to break down exactly who the different companies are, what type of business they run, and how many keywords from my target keywords they actually rank for. And so now I can see, all right, Run Guides is a very popular directory, Find a Race is a very popular directory, and so on. And so what I want to do next is I now want to identify who are the actual competitors that I found during the search engine results stage, who are competitors, and how can I analyze them in more detail. Now, the point of doing this part of the process is to first of all understand what it is that we're dealing with, what the quality of their sites are, and to then basically use that information to figure out, how we can position ourselves or how we can improve or build on what it is that they're already doing. And so typically when I'm running a competitor analysis, there are a few key things that I look for. Number one is, where's the company actually located? So I oftentimes find if you're building a local directory, it's way more of a problem if you are competing against a local business or another business that is actually based in the country that you're in, or even in the city that you're in. Then I also want to have a high level overview of what it is that this business does. Is it their core business? What else do they do? All those types of things. Then what I want to do is I want to figure out what people have to say about them. So what are the pros? What are the cons? What do people say? Then I also want to understand how they make money, how much money they do make, and so on. And so ultimately what this will allow me to do is get a really good understanding of who it is that we're competing against. Now, part of the research is oftentimes just simply going to be to actually just check out their websites and to just do your own type of research on them. Oftentimes you can find a lot of this information just by going to the About section of their site, or just typing in the name of their business and then typing in something like reviews. And that will oftentimes give you a really good understanding of what it is that people actually think about the brand. You can use their Facebook page and their Google review listings to kind of figure out what they do well, what they do not do so well, and so on. But ultimately, one way that you can really speed up this process is by running a workflow that does all of the competitor analysis for you. And the tool that I tend to use in this case is Perplexity AI. Now, in case you don't know what Perplexity AI is, it's kind of like ChatGPT, but with search functionality. It's really good. It's really reliable. And basically what you can do is you can just go in here, you can put in your query, something like, I'm building a running directory, blah, 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 blah. Can you please tell me something about, and then I can just go into my base and I can just go ahead and find out, who they are. So I'll just go ahead, I'll copy it. And then from here, I'll just paste it in and I'll run the query. And then what this tool will do is it will go ahead and it will look at a lot of different sources to basically find answer to those questions. Now, Perplexity has a lot of different models that you can use, and I'd actually recommend experimenting with different models to kind of see what it is what the kind of results are that you get. But overall, I have found that you get quite good results with all of the models. And so what we can do now with this particular workflow in Perplexity is take it into make.com and automate this. Now, this workflow is triggered by a custom action that I got set up. So what happens is I just click on my Perplexity research action, and what that will do is it will trigger a workflow inside of make.com that will then go ahead and start this workflow. Now, what happens in this step is that it will then go ahead, the webhook will fire, and it will then also receive the Airtable ID that I passed through when I fired the workflow in Airtable Automations. From here, what I do is I retrieve the competitor record. So it will just go ahead, it will see my Airtable ID, and then it will just simply go into my Airtable database, look for the Airtable ID, and figure out what record it belongs to. Now, from here, I can retrieve all of this information, and the next part in this process is to then go through the next steps where I run my search analysis prompt with Perplexity AI. So the prompt that I put in here is pretty much what I just showed you in the manual step, but I just say, hey, I'm building this kind of website and here are the questions that I have. And then the second part of the prompt is to just type in the information of the company and their website, and then it will go ahead and do its thing. Now, once it's done, it will give you a result, but the result that it typically gives you is usually just a big long content block that looks a little bit like this. And oftentimes the problem with that is that it's very hard to get this type of content block nicely formatted into our competitor research table. So what I end up doing is I end up pulling this particular workflow through a ChatGPT step where I basically give it the entire prompt or the entire result that I got from Perplexity AI, and I then ask it to format it into the following JSON strings. So I say, give me the about section, the business model section, customer reviews, strengths, weaknesses, and location. And then the end result that I get out of that is this all nicely formatted into individual fields that I can then store inside of my Airtable database. And so that is what ultimately then allows me to create a detailed report on every company that looks a little bit like this. So it will tell me, hey, this is how they make money. This is, what customers say about their platform. Here's what their unique selling points are. Here's what we could do better. And then again, you have an overview of all of the different keywords that we're working with. And it also tells you where they're located and a little bit about the business itself. Now, obviously, the research in itself doesn't end here. We're definitely just looking at the businesses at a high level right now, but obviously, if we want to compete for certain keywords, we actually need to drill into individual pages that these companies have to understand what it is that they're doing well and how we can potentially improve on that. This part here is key when it comes to trying to outrank more established sites, because the more content rich and the more valuable your individual sites are, the more likely you are going to move up the search rankings for those terms. Now, some of the specific things that I'm typically looking out for is, what kind of content blocks do they have on specific landing pages? I go in depth into their individual listing pages to kind of see what it is that they do. I also try to not just focus purely on the directory. You can oftentimes get a little bit of a head start when it comes to monetizing by understanding what it is that other sites are doing to monetize, because oftentimes the more established they are, the more tried and tested those types of business models are. And so you can definitely use that as a starting point to figure out how it is that you could potentially start charging for your site. So that was the third video on how to do competitor analysis for your directory business. But hopefully, as you've seen, if you are building any kind of business and you're looking for a way to use organic traffic as the way to, attract customers, then this is something you can use as well. If there are any questions about it, please do let me know. Don't forget to check out the local directory playbook that is now open to early builders, early founders. Other than that, I hope this was useful, and I'll see you back here for the next video.